Isaac Kashdan, white. Herman Steiner, black. Pasadena, August 1932.
Pawn d4. Knight f6. Knight f3. Pawn d5. Pawn e3. Pawn e6. Bishop d3. Knight b8, d7. Knight b1, d2. Bishop e7. Queen e2. Pawn c5. Pawn c3.
White is playing the Cole system, so called because it was the favorite of the late Edgar Cole, well-known Belgian master. It is a slow development, but woe to black if he attempts too early aggression against it. The plan for white is to play pawn e4, rather than pawn b4, with a view towards a strong kingside attack.
Castles kingside. Castles kingside. Pawn b6. Pawn e4. Pawn takes e4.
This pawn must be taken, or else pawn e5 follows.
Knight takes e4. Bishop b7. Rook d1.
An interesting gain of time. If at once bishop g5, black can play knight takes e4, exchanging the minor pieces with an even game. Now he must move his queen off the file.
Queen c7. Bishop g5. Rook f8, e8.
Necessary to protect the bishop, for if here knight takes e4, bishop takes e7, rook e8, bishop h4. The two bishops constitute a distinct advantage in this position.
Pawn takes c5.
What has been accomplished so far? Black has played the opening carefully and is now ready to liquidate in the center, which will ensure his equality. White has maintained a slight edge in development, with the rook already on an open FLLE, and his piece is somewhat better placed.
Bishop takes e4. Bishop takes e4. Knight takes e4. Queen takes e4. Knight takes c5. Queen c4. Bishop takes g5. Knight takes g5. Queen e7. Knight f3.
The smoke has cleared, and the battle is to be resumed with diminished forces. What white has played for is an advantage of pawns on the queen side. These he will advance, eventually obtaining a passed pawn, or else isolating one of the remaining black pawns, and attempting to win it. Black can similarly advance his kingside pawns, but there are two difficulties. In the middle game, he would endanger his king. In the endgame, the distance of the king from the other side might well prove the deciding factor in white's favor. A pawn majority on the queen side is therefore worth obtaining when the opportunity offers.
Rook e8, d8.
Still wishing to simplify, which white is not yet ready to do.
Knight d4. Queen h4.
The best move, threatening pawn e5, and driving the white queen back. Had he played rook c8, white would force an entrance with pawn b4. If then knight e4, attacking the queen. Knight c6. Rook takes d1 check. Or queen c7. Rook takes d8 check. Rook takes d1. Pawn b5. Winning at least the exchange. Rook takes d1. Queen c7. Knight e7 check. King f8. Knight takes c8. Queen takes c4. Rook d8 mate.
Queen e2. Rook a8, c8. Pawn a4.
Not pawn b4, because of knight a4.
Queen f6.
to play pawn e5. But he is allowed no time.
Pawn b4. Knight d7. Knight b5. Knight f8.
If pawn h6, knight d6, rook takes c3, knight e4 wins.
Queen e3.
Protecting the pawn c3, and threatening rook takes d1, followed by knight takes a7. The object is to force a weakening advance of black's pawns. The advantage of the extra queenside pawn is already telling.
Pawn a6. Knight d6. Rook b8.
If rook takes c3, knight e4, rook takes e3, knight takes f6 check, with the exchange plus. Rook c6, however, was better than the text.
Rook d2.
Not pawn c4. For rook takes d6. Rook takes d6. Queen takes a1. Check would be unpleasant. The advance cannot be delayed.
Queen e7. Rook a1 d1. Queen c7. Pawn c4. Rook d7. Queen c3. Pawn h6. Knight e4.
In order to play pawn c5, and if pawn takes c5, retake with the knight. Also the exchange of one rook will be welcome, to clear the way for the pass pawn.
Rook takes d2. Rook takes d2. Rook c8. Knight d6. Rook d8. Pawn c5.
This had to be carefully analyzed. Such an advance, if it does not bear immediate fruit, may result in the pawn becoming a weakness. If pawn takes c5, queen takes c5, queen takes c5, pawn takes c5, rook d7. Otherwise at once pawn c6 and c7, pawn c6, rook c7, rook c2, knight g6, knight e8, rook c8, pawn c7, knight e7, knight d6, wins. The student can note how important is the absence of the black king from the scene of action.
Queen c6.
Attacking the pawn f4. But white has an effective counter.
Queen f3.
Black dare not exchange queens, which would allow the same play noted above, so
Queen takes a4. Queen takes f7. King h7.
but here it would appear, what with black threatening mate, also the pawn b6, that white overplayed his hand, and is in some distress. But there is a hidden resource which makes everything right again.
Pawn h3.
Stopping the mate. If now queen takes b4, knight e4, threatening mate in 2 by knight f6, check, and also rook takes t8.
Pawn takes c5. Pawn takes c5.
And not at this point knight e4. Because of queen a1 check. King h2. Rook takes d2. The check at knight f6 is now defended. Knight takes d2. Knight g6. With the advantage.
Rook b8.
If queen a1 check. King h2. Queen e5 check. Pawn f4. Queen takes c5. Knight e4. Would again prevail.
King h2. Knight g6. Rook e2.
Not queen takes e6 on account of queen f4, check, winning the rook. Now the pawn can hardly be saved.
Rook f8. Queen takes e6. Queen f4. Pawn g3. Queen d4. Queen e3. Queen takes e3. Pawn takes e3. Knight e5.
After all the strife, white has emerged with a pawn plus, but the win is still far from easy. Black plays to keep the pawns back, and gain time to move his king to the center. White will attempt to advance the pawn c5, with all seemly haste.
King g2. Pawn a5. Rook c2. Knight c6. Knight b5.
In order with knight d4, to drive back the knight, or exchange it leaving the black rook tied to a defensive position in front of the pawn.
Rook d8.
To prevent knight d4, but it can be played nevertheless.
Knight d4. Knight takes d4. Pawn takes d4. Rook takes d4. Pawn c6. Rook d8. King f3.
Pawn c7. Would only draw, strange to say. The game would go rook c8. King f3. Pawn f4. King e4. Pawn f3. King d5. Pawn a2. Forcing the exchange of pawns. The king is one move short of being able to protect the advanced pawn. He therefore sallies forth at once.
Pawn a4.
Equally unavailing would be king g6. King e4. King f6. Pawn c7. Rook c8. King d5. King e7. King c6 and b7 winning the rook.
King e4. Pawn a3. King e5.
Now he is in a position to advance pawn c7, and king d6, which ensures the victory.
Rook d3.
A last desperate attempt which succeeds in delaying matters.
Pawn c7. Pawn a2. Rook takes a2. Rook c3. King d6. Rook d3. King c6. Rook c3. King b7. Rook b3. King a8. Rook c3.
Rook a7. Resigns. King b8 follows, and if rook b3 check, rook b7.
Comments and subscribe please, and thanks for watching. Good luck you.